To the members of the press who are assembled here today and listening across the country, I am asking for your courage to tell it like it is. This is not a time to pretend here that there are two sides to this story.
Back in August, Pritzker gave a really good press conference that a lot of lefties hoped would be all it would take to beat Donald Trump. It was a great press conference.
I say, Mr. President, do not come to Chicago.
One of the things Pritzker did, and it was great, was he had basically Chicago's community there behind him.
The faith community, law enforcement, education, community organizations, and more.
But it was wish casting to believe that was going to be enough to defeat Donald Trump.
I think he should beg for help.
Days later, Trump said, instead of invading Chicago, I've decided I'm going to invade
New Orleans,
which, by the way, hasn't happened.
We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks.
What we've seen since, and in fact, what we saw in court filings in Chicago and Illinois' challenge to what has happened, which is an invasion.
Dozens of people have been arrested in the Chicago area as part of President Trump's Operation Midway Blitz.
Was that immediately after that, even on the same days where Trump was saying,
we go to a place like New Orleans.
Instead, ICE was laying the groundwork for an invasion.
In the case of Portland, you have an acute crisis with threats to life and property at the Portland ICE facility. And so that is a reactive deployment.
For an invasion that was, and this is what Chicago argued, deliberately intended to elicit a response that would justify the National Guard going in.
The president has also said that in the immediate future, in Chicago, there's a need for the second. Obviously,
we're fighting two things. We're fighting the invasion of yet another blue city.
We're just at the start. We're going to go into other cities that we're not talking about purposely.
We're fighting the deportations. What is happening in the fight to stave off the invasion is also making the deportations far less popular.
Where's the limit for you on what's acceptable conduct for federal law enforcement? And when is it incumbent on Congress to step up and demand oversight?
To demand oversight on federal law enforcement? Well, I've not seen them cross the line yet. Most recently, the most threatening thing I've seen yet was the naked bicyclers in Portland who were protesting ICE down there. I mean, it's getting really ugly.
Now, I want to take a step back and describe how Portland and Chicago argued against their invasions. I think they're important legally. When California argued against their invasion in the summer, they basically said the protests are not big enough to justify an invasion.
We went through this in California with Newsom. He made a total fool of himself, pretending he had authority to defy a lawful presidential command of the National Guard.
The Ninth Circuit basically said, we get to review this, but the president is entitled to a great deal of deference. And he says that he needed to invade, so he gets to invade.
We won in the very liberal Ninth Circuit, and a portion of the California National Guard has remained federalized to this day.
Oregon argued that the only justification you've given for the invasion are these Trump tweets, and the facts on the ground do not match Trump's tweets.
I'm directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland.
We actually know that one of the things going on, two things are going on. One is that Trump watches nothing but Fox News.
Portland burning to the ground.
And on Fox News, they're showing video from 2020 or occasionally from South America.
Unbelievable what's going on.
And Trump believes that is what Portland looks like today. He actually even told an NBC reporter,
she was very nice, but I said, well, wait a minute. Am I watching things on television that are different from what's happening?
So one thing that's going on is Trump lives in a bubble of propaganda, and he literally does not know what's going on the ground. And he trusts what he sees on Fox News more than what he hears from people on the ground.
Wow. Antifa's armed? Yeah, they have machetes, they have guns, and it's just lawless. And they don't care because the city doesn't enforce the laws.
In addition, there's a bunch of outside agitators like Nick Sartor, who have for years masterminded the process of instigating trouble.
That's insane. Well, I'm glad you're okay, and you're a brave man. Great day for you guys at the White House today.
And of course, Portland has a really big Proud Boy community. There are people on the ground that are one step adjacent from the Proud Boys. So another thing you're seeing is these right-wing, quote-unquote, influencers who are really outside agitators, who went all the way across the country from D.C. to do this, are creating content for Donald Trump.
Andy Ngo has been repeatedly beaten by Antifa thugs for his work in cruel, and Andy is A very serious person, too, I have to tell you. I've been watching him for a long time. Is Andy here?
And it is content designed to lead him to believe that things in Portland are worse than they are.
That's what I thought. Hello, Andy. I thought that was you.
Those people are fucking pissed, by the way, that everyone is now wearing frog costumes.
It's kind of ridiculous that they're being so aggressive and so inhumane with their treatment of immigrants. And that's why I'm here.
So that's what happened in Portland. And literally, that's what the judge said. She's like, you have no evidence, facts on the ground to match what shows up in Donald Trump's tweets.
He sends out the National Guard the same way you or I might make a late-night ShamWow purchase.
One of the things that happened in this court hearing is that one of the judges immediately asked DOJ,
are there any factual findings that you contend are clearly erroneous? And if so, precisely which ones?
And the DOJ lawyer said,
I think the answer to that, Judge Graber, is no, because I don't think there is a dispute about any of the relevant facts.
The judge was like,
So let me just be sure I understand your answer. You are not contending that any of the district court's factual findings are clearly erroneous.
In other words, Judge Emmerga described what she agrees were the facts in Portland.
Unbelievable what's going on.
What happened in Chicago was something different. And it's important for J.D. Pritzker's argument about this incitement that ICE literally tried to do. I mean, you know, as Trump was saying, we're going to invade New Orleans instead, ICE was going to the local police chief in Broadview, which is where the one ICE facility in Chicago is, and saying, we're going to invade here with a bunch of new ICE people, and we expect to have protests, we expect to have arrests, we expect to have violence.
First, they come out with literally flashbangs, the type of sort of shock and awe to people on the street would say terrorize the community. And then you see who they're really going after, like Maricela, the 53-year-old mother who was just going to buy meat for a stew.
So in other words, they said, we're bringing ICE, and we expect the response to that is something that then will give us an excuse to invite the National Guard.
They've handed out flyers. I saw one at Fly recently, and it said, we need to mobilize around the Broadview facilities, this is in Chicago, to shut down ICE. So what does that mean? When they say we're going to mobilize to shut down ICE, what do they say?
What the judge in Chicago ruled, Judge Perry, is that only 3 people submitted a version of their events on the ground in Chicago, and all 3 of them turned out to not be credible. Just as one example, on September 27th, Greg Bovino, who is sort of the Where's Waldo of corrupt Border Patrol, ICE, and DHS invasions.
Greg Bovino is the chief patrol agent of the Border Patrol. He went from Los Angeles to Chicago to carry out what they did on the streets of LA, on the streets of Chicago.
He came in on the 27th and said, this is going to be a shit show. Like, he set out to make a shit show. He had videos.
Breached fences and busted doors in an immigration raid on an entire apartment building on the city's south side. They pulled dozens of residents from their homes and zip ties, including children, some of them without any clothes.
He, of course, had videos when he invaded that apartment building on South Shore of Chicago with videographers, and sets out September 27th, there's going to be a shit show. According to Tricia McLaughlin, who's, of course, a liar, 11 people were arrested that day. One of those, at least we know, is a journalist. They have joined a lawsuit against ICE for violating their First Amendment rights, which leaves 10. Only 5 of the 10 were ever charged. Of those 5, all but 1 have been dismissed. And actually, Judge Perry missed one of the ones that was dismissed in her order. She's like, 3 of these have been dismissed. For example, there's a couple who were arrested because when ICE was trying to push them back, they found a gun and they arrested them as a violent threat. And turns out those guns, both of them had a gun. They both were registered. So basically, ICE arrested people because of their Second Amendment protected activity. There were 2 other incidences which were clearly ICE assaulting the quote unquote defendant. In one case, it was a neurodivergent guy, and they chased him for blocks and tackled him and then charged him with assault. So one of the things we're seeing is that the numbers ICE claims, DHS claims, don't end up coming to fruition because those end up being assaults on the part of ICE. So Pritzker has consistently been saying they're making shit up.
Gregory Bovino lies consistently, as does Kristi Noem, the president, the vice president of the United States. It's a tidal wave of lies, and it's hard to overcome those lies because it's propaganda. The media seems to cover it more than they do what the truth actually is often.
One of the things that super pissed off the judge was that as this was going on last week, there was an announcement that the National Guard, which was on its way, was going to, quote unquote, protect the federal courthouse in Chicago. And the judge was like, holy shit, really? Because the chief judge didn't order it, and they're the one who has to order it. And then, again, one of three affiants in this case said, oh, I'm sorry, that's not actually happening. The third person, by the way, is in charge of ICE in Chicago, and he submitted this long declaration, which was sort of almost Borgesian in its disorganization. One of the things that DOJ is claiming in both Chicago and Portland is we have to invade Chicago and Portland because somebody was shot in Dallas.
Senator, have you been told that immigrant detainees were the victims of today's shooting?
My understanding is the details of who the victims are still being ascertained, so I don't want to go ahead of law enforcement releasing these details. What they have said is that no law enforcement was injured.
Let me repeat again. We have to invade Oregon and Illinois because somebody was shot in Texas. Anyway, so the head of ICE, long declaration, makes these claims, and Chicago, Illinois, they're like, hey, here's an email he sent days ago saying, kudos for the great job you guys are doing policing these protesters. So in other words, Judge Perry was like, these people are lying, and therefore, I'm going to impose a state.
A federal appeals court judge shot down any mobilization of the National Guard of Illinois.
Because not only does this not resemble anything going on the ground, but you're lying. You have no credibility. And this is before Greg Bovino, who, again, the Where's Waldo of corrupt ICE enforcement.
So what I can say is that when President Trump uses the term insurrection, well, he was right.
He was involved in an assault charged for October 3rd, and then claimed that he had a groin injury and couldn't show up for the probable cause hearing and testify under oath. Remember, he testified under oath in Los Angeles and was humiliated because he wasn't telling the truth. And he has a groin injury, can't show up.
We talk about misplaced priorities.
But he can still show up on Fox News.
Misplaced priorities.
Long story being short, in Oregon, DOJ is admitting that the facts on the ground don't match Donald Trump's completely warped sense of reality. In Chicago, the judge found that the people who are claiming that the facts on the ground match Donald Trump's warped sense of reality.
It looks like a war zone.
They're lying. We will hear this week, with both of those cases will be heard. We will have action. We expect to have action from appeals courts this week. Since that's been going on, though, and this is the important thing, what we're seeing in Chicago is the kind of that goes beyond just a press conference. And it gave Pritzker the ammunition to be able to, at least initially, defeat this invasion. One thing he repeatedly talks about is make sure you film what's going on because they're lying and you capture it on film and we will be able to rebut it.
We do have to do our own investigations. And that's why it's so vital that people are pulling out their phones and filming.
Another thing that Chicago is doing, I saw somebody the other day say, has your neighborhood Facebook page turned into 40% talking about what they're going to do about the ICE invasion? And that's at one level horrible, but at another level, it says that the entire community is now mobilizing to resist ICE in legal and peaceful ways. And between the video of what ICE is actually doing,
it is clear when our communities are under attack, it's our community that keeps us safe.
They're now doing 3D printing of basically rape whistles with codes so that there's one code for ICE is here in the neighborhood, and there's another one from ICE is about to arrest somebody. And that, Apple took out an ICE finding app from its store. You don't need social media. This is a way to bypass even that, and it's a way to do it even if you don't have a phone. So we're seeing the kind of organization on the ground that is effective. One more thing that we should talk about is ICE shot a minister. He's part of a lawsuit that got an injunction against ICE. And then the other day, you even had Dick Durbin out at the ICE facility, but the other day you had Catholic priests trying to go offer communion to the detainees at the ICE Center at Broadview.
Meanwhile, in Rogers Park, the presence of federal agents outside of a local church brought out many in the community determined to keep parishioners safe.
Another thing we're seeing, and this was true of Los Angeles, it was true of New York, it's true of Portland. One of the things that hasn't gotten enough attention is that the vehicle between people who are taking videos and the larger national audience, so this is how I get to see these videos, is local independent media, right? And I keep thinking about this, like, yeah, we're really pissed off that Barry Weiss is taking over CBS.
The world has gone mad when we're not able to say that Hunter Biden's laptop is a story worth pursuing.
But CBS wouldn't be covering these stories anyway. When Brad Lander was arrested in New York City, it wasn't CBS that was capturing that arrest. It was the local independent news outlets. For example, there was this guy who was tackled by Bovino.
It's amazing how that narrative plays over and over and over.
He's being charged in assault of Bovino. One of the important court hearings where we learned about Bovino's alleged groin injury was just Oak Park's local news outlet, right? And we're seeing that over and over and over again. We're seeing as well activists against police violence who already knew how to film this, already were prepared to capture this. Some of the people who are on the ground filming are people who have documented ISP abuses going back a long time, and they're not wrong. Governor Pritzker, Governor Newsom, they are going to be in this delicate position where they need to be able to continue their legal argument that the cops that they have are making a diligent effort to prevent violence. And it's admittedly a balancing act, and that doesn't excuse real thuggishness. But to win legally, you need to be able to say, here's what my cops are doing. I don't need your cops.
The lawsuit mentioned Portland's police bureau has more than enough officers to respond to the small, ongoing ICE facility protests.
I think that DHS is very frustrated that viral videos are working so well.
It's a tough situation out there on the streets of Chicago.
There's a case of an older person, Jose Fuentes, who was in a hospital where somebody, like the guy in Carson, had his leg destroyed by ICE.
The president of Humboldt Park Health called me extremely worried that ICE agents were in the emergency room, worried that staff were in fear.
They were there in a hospital saying, do you have a warrant? You know, you need a warrant to be in this part of the hospital. It was the emergency room.
This is the hospital.
And they arrested Fuentes.
What law did I break? They had to take those handcuffs off. Because we have constitutional rights, and in the city of Chicago.
And Fuentes announced yesterday that they're going to sue DHS ICE for it. And one of the things, again, that we're seeing is that the same ICE guy who manhandled them also was going after, by the way, I'm not sure which pronouns Fuentes uses, so I apologize if them doesn't work, but this is the same ICE guy who also assaulted this teenager and threw her into a Tahoe. These local news outlets are exactly who is prepared to go in and say, interview the people who lived in that South Shore apartment that was invaded. And we are incredibly in debt to them for capturing this and magnifying these videos. You know, we're seeing other things like humor in the frog outfits and J.D. Pritzker
reporting from war-torn Chicago,
making his little interview about being invaded by the Brewers.
It's quite disturbing. We've seen people being forced to eat hot dogs with ketchup on them. And our deep dish pizza, well, has gone shallow.
These things are having an important effect.
Do you need a job now? Yeah. Are you a big tough guy? Yeah. Tough enough for the army or police? No.
Another thing that happened, by the way, is that the woman who was shot, Miramar Martinez.
New information and inconsistencies are making people question the government's version of what happened.
Court records reveal Border Patrol agents on the scene were all equipped with body-worn cameras on October 4th. When this shooting took place, only 3 cameras were actually activated.
Who claims that ICE rammed her.
The body cam footage shows just before the shooting, an agent was seen holding an assault rifle and saying, quote, do something, B-word.
Called her a bitch and then started shooting.
No one with a heart is going to go along with that.
And they're trying to preserve those records. But in that case, she had identified an ICE guy. He's a podcaster. He has his own YouTube channel in advance of being shot. And that same guy, the guy she identified, the YouTuber, was 2 blocks away later that day, violently assaulting someone else, grabbing them by the neck. So we're beginning to identify these people.
Why is taking people away and keeping them anonymous part of their protocol?
Because that is what they want people to see. The show of force is the point. Adam Serwer said the cruelty is the point.
What is happening in both of these cities is that ICE looks like invaders. ICE looks fucking ridiculous, starting with the butt cracks and beer bellies and going to the fact that they've got snipers pointed at furries. They've got snipers pointed at inflatable frogs, right? You've also got that solidarity, which, again, it's the idea that Pritzker started. And by the way, Pritzker did something else that's super smart, is he got Oklahoma's governor and Vermont's governor, both Republicans, to come out against the invasion.
Republican Governor Kevin Stitt said that he was surprised by Governor Greg Abbott's decision, adding Oklahomans would, quote, lose their minds if the Illinois governor sent troops to the state during the Biden administration.
So now you've got governors standing up against one state's National Guard invading another state, in this case, Texas, and Trump wants to use California's National Guard to invade Chicago.
I'm not going to sit here and say, advance what is next.
So whereas the original Pritzker press conference, it was wish casting to say that was enough to fight what we're against, what has happened in the wake of it, particularly, I mean, in both Chicago, Portland, and even Los Angeles, what has happened in the wake of it is the kind of top to bottom mobilization against an invasion that clearly makes the invasion illegitimate. So you've got all aspects of civil society, right? You've got journalists.
What's your name?
Debbie Brockman, I work for WGN.
Pastors, other activists suing to enjoin this. You've got the alderperson suing against one particular thug. You've got the state suing and being able, because of the filming of local people, to debunk the false claims that people like Bovino and Tricia McLaughlin are making. And that is what has not happened earlier, which is, you know, I think when Pritzker gave that press conference, everyone's like, oh, finally, the leader that we need. And he is offering really important leadership, and he is fearless. And he had that great video where he said,
if you hurt my people, nothing will stop me, not time or political circumstance, from making sure that you face justice under our constitutional rule of law.
That's all great, but it's not enough.
Thank you.
Chicago has not succeeded in preventing the deportation. Chicago has not succeeded in saving their neighbors. One of the things I hear from people I talk to in Chicago is these gaps in their life of the Latino that used to be there. But one of the things that Chicago has succeeded with this entire all-community response is to significantly raise the costs of the invasion, of the attempt to create a pretext for an invasion. Those videos that everyone took, the presence that everyone had, the know your rights to be able to insist on a warrant. So when cops arrested Jose Fuentes, for example,
Do you have a sign to this warrant for him?
That was illegal, and it was illegal and caught on film. So what Chicago hasn't fixed the deportation problem. They have significantly raised the cost of the invasion, the attempt to manufacture an invasion.
There's a gathering storm over Chicago and the suburbs, even as Illinois State Police and regular federal law enforcement agents have been able to stand up to fairly small and only sometimes violent crowds.
And at least thus far, we'll see what happens with the 7th Circuit later in the week. At least thus far, it worked. Where things go next, and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller have told us where things go next, is the Insurrection Act.
Insurrection Act.
Even as every outlet has been saying, we need to declare the Insurrection Act. There was a court filing that included Trump focusing on the Insurrection Act. We have an article saying they want to invoke the Insurrection Act, but they think it may not work.
Well, the Insurrection Act is called the Insurrection Act for a reason.
We know what the legal argument to defeat the Insurrection Act claim is going to need to be. And that is going to need to be that Trump is not having problems enforcing the law in Chicago.
There has to be a rebellion. There has to be an insurrection in order for him to be allowed to invoke it.
What Trump is having, in fact, what we're seeing, and this is where I think this work in the last 6 weeks has presented a very good case. They were not trying to enforce the law. They were trying to create arrest numbers. We know that now because those cases all got dismissed. When they have bashed cars, they have been bashing people who were filming them or tracking them, but who were not obstructing them. They have been arresting one after another, after another, after another, after another documented or U.S. person for no good reason, and then having to invent a story after the fact.
Again, he can say anything he wants.
This is a balancing act, just like sending out Illinois cops, right? You need to be able to show that what Trump says he's trying to do, he's able to do. But I think it needs to go further and say, not only is Trump not trying to enforce deportation, Trump is using ICE as a pretext to invade.
If the Constitution means anything, and I guess we all are questioning that right now, but the courts will make the determination.
Trump is using ICE as a pretext to arrest documented and U.S. citizen brown people and a lot of white people. Trump is arresting people because they have legal weapons. Trump is shooting ministers, right?
If the Constitution means anything, the Insurrection Act cannot be invoked to send them in because they want to fight crime.
ICE are the ones violating the law. It will take years until we can get some accountability for these ICE thugs who are ramming cars, but we need to start talking in that language now to defeat the Insurrection Act invocation, which will be the next fight in court if this one succeeds.
Thank you.